And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com. Dan Strafford, Dave Loncrin along with you on this Wednesday morning. We have a 10-game NBA slate. But first, Lofty and I thought it would be best if we broke down the election for you all. No, just kidding. We're not going to do that. Dave, how the hell are you doing?
Oh, doing well, man. I'll tell you, I voted, no doubt about it. There was, you got to vote, whether you believe your vote counts or not. And in some spots, it probably doesn't, depending on which way you lean, but you got to do it anyway. At least I do. Not saying you have to, right? But I believe so. And it was always a total shit show, right? Like, as you tweeted out, live coverage of, midterms or really any election, especially based on whichever broadcast you're watching. Just one thinks it's Armageddon, one thinks it's phenomenal, the other thinks it's the end of the world too. It's just it's a mess, man. And this is the polarization of politics in 2018. So that's all I shall say.
It was an interesting one. I will share the anecdote myself of voting. Person in front of me, scanners here in Massachusetts, had their sort of not be counted, and so the women running the polling place opened up the scanner, and there were about 7 to 10 ballots that were jammed into the scanner, and they claimed all of them were fine. They rescanned hers, it counted it, and it went through. They grabbed mine and went to put it through, and it didn't count it. You heard actual like it wasn't scanning it the whole way. Open it up now. Hers is there and mine is there stuck together. So woman grabs them and holds them up and goes, well, this one was counted, and puts it in manually into the box, then holds up the other one and says, well, rescan this one.
Digital.
What's that?
Ours is just digital.
Yeah, I wish. Okay. But the thing is, she held them both up. She had no idea which was which. She had no idea if mine was counted or the woman in front of me was counted. So, like, conceivably, talking about votes not counting, quite legitimately, my vote may not have been counted, which is fine. Hey, I live in Massachusetts. I think most people who listen to this podcast know which way I lean. So I'm pretty sure doesn't necessarily matter therein. But I said it, I do believe it. I will say you should vote. It's all about the ballot questions and the down ballot stuff. The mayors, the town council, the state senates, like that's votes that do count and do come down to, very small margins of victory. So I will always say, don't worry necessarily about president, senators, all those things because of the margin of victory.
Unless you live in Florida.
Yeah, that's... There are like 10,000 people in Florida who are like, we're deciding this thing right now.
It's amazing. Millions and millions of votes. It's like, yeah, too close to call. We're going to have to hand count these last 50.
Yep. Everyone's going to watch us. Let's get to the action here. 10 games on tap in the NBA coming off of 4 on Tuesday night. We do have some games with lines, some that do not have lines as of yet. Everything over 200 yet again, which what we'll see for the entirety of the season. A few teams on back-to-backs. Dave, as always, any injuries that you at least want to flag here early on for people to keep an eye on?
Well, the Kawhi Leonard thing is really interesting because, it appeared that he had mentioned that he felt perfectly fine before the first game of that back-to-back. And we're like, okay, well, he's just being rested. No big deal, right? Well, then he misses the second game of the back-to-back, and then he's questionable again. So I don't know what to make of Kawhi Leonard. I think this is a really strange spot right now because you have to ask yourself, is this something more than he led on to? Much like last season where he was dealing with that injury that we thought was nothing big, and then he stayed out almost the entirety of the season. I don't think so. I don't think it's minor, or I don't think it's major, but he's now missed, consecutive games when it looked like he was just being held out for rest. So yeah, I certainly think that's something we need to pay close attention to. Evan Fournier is questionable. That could free stuff up. We'll talk about that. Taurean Prince questionable. Tim Hardaway questionable. This one might have some impact. Russell Westbrook is not playing. He's got that sprained ankle. Looked kind of nasty too. Rudy Gay is out. Hassan Whiteside is questionable. Pau Gasol is out. We'll talk about that later. God, this just keeps on going. Robert Covington is questionable. Could put someone like Wilson Chandler into the mix. Not that you necessarily want to run him out there. Alfred Payton. And Mike Muscala, by the way, I think he's dealing. He has a facial laceration, so they might be down some depth there. Not sure how much that matters, but we'll talk about that as well. I swore there was one more here. Donovan Mitchell should play. We talked about Kawhi. Norman Powell's going to be out for whatever that's worth. And then the last one. Yeah, there it is. Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague has already been ruled out. Would you look at that? I found somebody in the YouTube comments of one of our podcasts said, from the other, he's like, if you can't handle the late scratches, go get a real job and see how that works out. I mean, I kind of look at it this way. Do people that have real jobs complain about their jobs and still not quit? Right? Like, people complain about their jobs, right? And they don't quit. So that's all. I mean, I get the point. You're saying that, it's cool to do this. It is, but I can complain. I got the microphone.
Right. I mean, well, yeah, I'm
stopping playing.
I have one of those real jobs. And I do complain about it fairly regularly. So
I can attest to that.
So there's that, first of all. But yeah, I get people who like to play that card of, if you don't like it, do something else, which is fine. If you really don't like it, you can go find another career. But it's also something legitimate to complain about when it's part of your line of work. But I digress, as always. Tons of injuries, as Dave just went over. Westbrook probably the biggest of all in this matchup here with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But we'll keep an eye on all of those throughout the day over there in Slack chat. If you're not yet a member of Awesemo.com, you can use the promo code EARLYBIRD, which is the name of this podcast, to get in for free for 1 week, get you all access to Awesemo.com. So that's projections, rankings, grades, and articles. And then obviously all of the shows over there on YouTube. You get the strategy show in the morning, then you get A to B from 2:30 to 3:30 every day, depending on the golf schedule. And then you get deep dive at 5 and live up until lock with Spags and Josh and Ed Fear, bringing you up to lock. Got a little sore throat going there for a second. I apologize. But let's dive into point guard, where with Westbrook off the slate. Wow. We're going to make it through. I had a cereal bar before we recorded, and I think
flakes stuck in your throat.
It's like one of those stupid. Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about Ben Simmons, Lowry. Trae Young has been playing fairly well of late. You have Levine here, whose usage is through the roof. Doncic and on we go. So a deep position always. 10 games should have plenty of options. Wondering about pricing here, and who are some of your favorite names?
All right. I'll let you mute your microphone while I talk for a second, because I could hear that one coming on. Kyle Lowry against Sacramento. I mean, especially if Kawhi's out, you're just going to keep running him out there, right? He keeps putting up monster numbers. Only played 29 minutes in that blowout against what is usually a very slow-paced, quality Utah team. It's not like the loss of Donovan Mitchell is really going to hurt their defense. If anything, you'd think it would actually bolster it a bit. And Lowry comes out with another big game. I don't know if you know this, Dan, but Lowry has racked up. He has played 11 games. He has points, assists, double-doubles in 9 of them, and 9 of his last 10. So 9 of his last 10 games have been point, assist, double-doubles. The only one that wasn't was a 9.15 assist game where he came 1 point shy. I mean, the assist totals this season are absurd. You're getting Kyle Lowry, who right now could legitimately lead the entire league in assists by the time all is said and done. If you look at potential assists, my guess is that he probably, it's funny because I go to look it up and NBA says that there's no data for this. I have no idea what's going on with NBA.com recently. They get rid of the play type, and now none of the tracking is working either. So that really sucks, but hopefully it's working by the morning. And if it's not, I'm going to be pissed because they never respond on their Twitter handle either. But
one thing I noticed, Dave, was that there are filters that are built in now where I have to clear them to get data. So I have to go into advanced filters a lot of times where games played was set to 60 randomly on the page. And I had to swipe. Yeah. So I've had to go in even if I'm just that's what's happened to me twice on looking at usage and looking at other stats.
Because none of that's happening here. None of
So
that. With me.
I do think something's wrong. I don't think it's as wrong as it may be, though. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's really weird. It looks like, oh, okay, there's an X here. Let's see if I X that and run it. Yeah, still nothing. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is. But Lowry is still crushing in that category, and I think you'd take my word on it because you see what he's doing every day. And he leads the league in assists by more than 2 assists per game right now. He's averaging 11 and a half. I really like Lowry, even if Kawhi's out or in, but if Kawhi's out, it just makes this better because, the game will hopefully be a little bit closer. Sacramento is playing decent enough basketball to keep this game, remotely competitive at home, at least for 3 quarters. I want to wait and talk about Levine and Mitchell at shooting guard, but it's weird because this position doesn't really have anybody high priced. You don't have James Harden on the slate, and then you don't have Russell Westbrook, but you do have Dennis Schroeder against Cleveland at 6,900. If Schroeder, look, he's not dirt cheap, right? So that makes it so he's not a must play here, but he's definitely a good play. And if you're deciding on, do I want Trae Young, second of a back-to-back against the Knicks? He's going to see a lot of Frank Ntilikina, assuming he doesn't get benched, or do I want Dennis Schroeder at a $700 discount? I'll definitely take Schroeder here. By the way, DraftKings now has Luka Doncic at point guard and small forward.
Yep.
Still wrong, but better than nothing, right? So for now, we'll take it. If Elfrid Payton plays and isn't limited, he's 5,400. I don't want to say it's a lock because it's not a lock, but Elfrid Payton at that price point, given how productive he had been early in the season, just kind of, not letting the heavy usage of guys like Davis and Mirotic and not even Holiday, but Holiday gets shots, not letting that affect him and really taking that role where you kind of sit back and be the facilitator, grab some boards, get it done and put up solid numbers each night. I really like this position, and I like that none of them are super, super pricey. Like I don't see myself going to Simmons here because I think you can just go cheaper and feel good about it. De'Aaron Fox has a tough matchup, but he's cheap, and I just love the kid. I loved him coming into the league and worried a little bit last year, but now we're seeing some good numbers. Again, I still prefer Schroeder there, but up and down, this is a good position. I think best value-wise, though, Elfrid Payton right now has to be considered. It's kind of sickening, but George Hill, based on the minutes that he's seeing since the coaching change, is viable at 4,000 flat against OKC. Not a terrible matchup, and I don't expect him to see any difficult defensive matchups. And then with Teague out, I guess it's only fair that we throw Derrick Rose into the mix because Derrick Rose is getting plenty of work. He played 35 minutes last game, attempted 20 shots. Look, you're not going to get the 50.67 fantasy point games very often, Dan. But if I'm getting 35 minutes in regulation and around 20 shots from Derrick Rose, at 5,600, I'm definitely going to keep considering him. He's going to remain in my player pool for sure.
Don't forget, obviously, Dave writes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the deep dive over there at awesemo.com. So you get not only this analysis, but a deep dive into all the stats that he's looking for. Hopefully, NBA.com stops hiding them from him so we can get the best of the best each and every write-up. Either way, he'll dig through and find the best values and top plays at each position. And then if you're a member of awesemo.com, you also get access to Slack chat where you can ask questions and get discussions amongst all the subs, which is always a good way to make your way through. If we move next to shooting guard, obviously point guard might come back up again because of some small forward eligibility and shooting guard eligibility. You do have Kawhi at the top here at 9,400. Probably talk more of him at small forward. DeRozan as well at 92. Then you get Oladipo, Drew Holiday, Zach LaVine here at 8,500. And then we make our way into the likes of Jamal Murray, who shot, 73 times last game or something along those lines.
Is that just, I mean, come on.
Didn't see that coming. But
30 field goal attempts, he shot 19 for 30. If someone tweeted me, he's like, LOL, a lot of the guys that you didn't like on yesterday's deep dive ended up smashing. And I'm like, and then he read them off. One of them was Cantor. And it wasn't that I didn't like Cantor. We just didn't talk about Cantor, right? Because, he was And look, I'm not even making excuses here. Let me get to my point. I just didn't expect Cantor to play 41 minutes and have a 23-24 double-double.
Right.
Monster game. I mean, I'll take the L on that. Fine. I wasn't on Cantor. And I'll take the L on Murray, too. No, I was not on Jamal Murray against Boston. I really like him. He's really good. I mean, this kid is already having a breakout season, and we saw glimpses of it last year. But I certainly didn't see a career-high 48 points on 19 for 30 shooting against Boston. I also think this Denver team is good. And then with Hezonja, with Hezonja, what are you going to do, right? I did have some Hezonja. I played, I think, 4 lineups. I had 2 of 4. It was super cheap. I didn't hate him. The minutes definitely helped that, we had the overtime, and Ntilikina only played 16 because he shot himself off the court, dude. He's such a bad shooter. And Hezonja definitely benefited from that in the absence of Hardaway. But yeah, in terms of Jamal Murray, I did not see that coming. I certainly didn't. And you know what? Against Memphis at this price, I'm not going to chase it. I'm certainly not going to chase it, Dan. What I'd rather do is play, assuming he's back to full health, and it seems like he's fine, play Donovan Mitchell against Dallas. Dallas on the second of a back-to-back. And I think Mitchell could have a big game. This could be one of those blow-up games for Mitchell. I really like this spot. I think his price point is really affordable and fair. So he's one of the guys I said we'd talk about once we got to shooting guard. I like this position quite a bit. It's funny how much deeper it's gotten over the years, isn't it? Outside of that, I don't think you need to pay for Kawhi. Jimmy Butler against the Lakers. I really think Butler is too cheap here, and I thought the same the other day. He played 39 minutes, and it just seemed like he was not interested. But again, if he's going to play 39 minutes, Dan, 37, 39 minutes, I'm going to keep considering Butler. Maybe it's a bad decision, but that's too cheap for a guy with his upside. And then Zach LaVine's price is finally beginning to match his production. We've been saying all season that's not the case. He is top 3 in usage still. He had a monster 41-point game. Granted, we'll take the 49 minutes in overtime, but even without overtime, he was having another really solid outing. Zach LaVine, do you pay for him here? I probably don't. I think I'd take the savings on Mitchell. They're very similar players, Dan, and Mitchell has a better matchup. And he's also, you're getting him at $1,100 discount.
Right.
So I think that's probably where I'm leaning. Butler slightly ahead of LaVine right now against the Lakers. This game, I don't think there's a total on it right now, but I expect it to be up there. I think this game will probably be around like 240, honestly, 238, something really high. But the Pelicans-Chicago game does have a very high total. The Pels are 10-point favorites, though. This game could get out of hand quickly. So I do think that there are other directions, better directions that we can take at the position. Some of them I just mentioned, and some of them we've talked about at point guard. Also throw out like Kent Bazemore, right? Kent Bazemore, dude, had a really bad first half, got in some early foul trouble. It wasn't looking good. And then he turned it around. His 30-some fantasy, I think he had 31.5 fantasy points, didn't kill you. Definitely didn't kill you. So I'm not complaining there. And I think you can go back to the well with somebody like Bazemore, whose price actually came down $200. If Taurean Prince is out, that really helps. And how about Kevin Huerter? You had him better first half than second half for sure. But if you at least take a look at minutes, well, he started. This game stayed competitive throughout. They were actually leading at halftime. And then the Hornets ended up, winning the third by 7, and then winning the fourth quarter by 7. But it was enough for all of the starters to play normal minutes, right? That's important. Len was in early foul trouble, so that's why he played a little bit less. But Huerter played 32 minutes, Dan. 32 minutes, only took 5 shots. But look, he grabbed some boards, had some steals, a few assists. If Prince is out, you're going to want to consider him again just because you're getting him at a significant discount. He's almost minimum salary across the board.
What's crazy here is how deep shooting guard has gotten so quickly. I, as a Knicks fan, I need to make the obligatory question about which of the Knicks you most trust at shooting guard. I know we can talk about who may be a good play here for DFS, but between Hardaway Jr., Damian Dotson, you have Trier, who I think is is he just point guard eligible on DK? Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just point guard eligible. Is there one that you trust most? It looks like Dotson's getting insane minutes, not a ton of usage, but he is getting 35 to 40 minutes on any given night.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. Like, you had Ntilikina, who played 16 minutes in that last game. He only plays 16 minutes, gets benched, literally shoots himself off the floor. So you see Emmanuel Mudiay swoop in and take most of the minutes that he likely would have had. So if you look at the way these rotations broke down, excuse me, Noah Vonleh was a guy that I had mentioned, if he's not in foul trouble, is going to start seeing good minutes again.
Right.
He played 35 minutes, and just go with me here. I'm not talking about all point or shooting guards, or I'm talking about everybody because it come full circle. But Ntilikina played, 6.5 minutes in his first stint, then 19 minutes to close out the first quarter, and then he played 3 minutes and 38 seconds in the second, and then in the third he got 4 minutes and then 1 minute at the end of the third, never came back in for the fourth, never came back in for either overtimes, and finished with under 17 minutes. So if you look at Hezonja, he comes in with 4 minutes remaining in the first, and he plays 14 straight minutes. Then you get him in the second half, and he comes in with 7 minutes remaining in the second and plays all the way through till halfway through the first overtime period. So that's 21 straight minutes there for Hezonja.
Right.
And then, you had 24 minutes for Trey Burke. You mentioned Dotson played 41 minutes. Mitchell Robinson played, I think, only 11 minutes. But then Trier played 41 and a half, almost 42 minutes. So these are some wild numbers. Cantor played 41. It's real tough. So if we look at just regulation without overtime, I would tell you who played the entire overtime periods, and then we'll move on. Mudiay played all 10 minutes in both overtimes. Cantor played all but 30 seconds until the end of overtime, and that's enough to think, okay, fine, he's playing it out. And then you had Trier, who played the entire 2 overtime periods. Dotson played both of them, and he played the final 7 minutes of the fourth. And then you had Vonleh, who played 8 of 10 minutes in those overtime periods. So that was your lineup that closed things out. But the weird thing is, the lineup that closed out the game was Hezonja, Mudiay, Trier, Dotson, and Vonleh. So it's really tough to get a gauge, is what I'm saying. And if you're talking about just in terms of who you trust with minutes, it's a roundabout way of saying Dotson right now. And if Hardaway's out, I think you can look to more Hezonja, because the rotation should lean in his favor. But I also think, and then we can move on, I also think that from what we've been seeing, David Fizdale is going to run with the hot hand in a lot of cases.
Yep.
Dan. So if Ntilikina came out and knocked down 5 of his first 6 shots, I think you would have seen a situation where he continues to play. But he was a liability. And Hezonja is the type of guy that can come out there and be ice cold. Dotson seems like you don't have to worry about that. He's going to get the minutes. It's just, do you want to pay now for a price tag that has come up above $5K as $5,300 on DraftKings, even though it's a very good matchup against the Hawks, who are playing their second of a back-to-back.
Makes sense. And decisions to be made. Obviously, we'll try to find better value as the day goes on and get a better situation than someone like Dotson, who he's shown a little bit of a ceiling, but nothing too crazy. But let's continue on.
I'll break that down more in the deep dives too, by the way. I'm going to do, just a full breakdown of how the rotations work, not just, flying by the seat of my pants on a podcast.
Well, fair enough. Small forward is next. LeBron here at 11K. Also power forward eligible. You have Ben Simmons, DeRozan, Paul George with Russell Westbrook out. Obviously, should be a usage monster here. Is 9,100. Mirotic, and we move on from there. Josh Richardson continues to put up points for the Miami Heat at 7,700. Aaron Gordon coming off a fairly solid outing last time out, putting up back-to-back near 40-point DraftKings outings. Against San Antonio, then against Cleveland. Price tag has risen to 7K. Small forward, not so not so shallow as it used to be in the past. Obvious upside plays here on the top end and some value we can get to in a little bit. What do you make of LeBron, Luke Walton? Is this a narrative game for LeBron, or do you see this just simply being a little bit of a distressful situation there for LA and not sure how to make LeBron work here at 11K?
Well, I'll tell you this much. That game from LeBron against Toronto, it seemed like he just didn't care. And Adam told me, shit my money, who I do the deeper dive with every day, who does a deep dive on days that I'm not doing it, we rotate, said that apparently at the end of the game, the Lakers, what's the Lakers assistant coach name? The hell is his name? Brian Shaw. Brian Shaw comes up to me and asks me when to go back out there, and he said something to the extent of like, those guys are doing fine. Mind you, they were down all game. They actually won 3 or 4 quarters. They just lost the first quarter by like 35 points. It could never really get it close, but he said they cut the lead down to 10 points, and he basically like had no intentions of coming back out. So right now, I just don't really have any desire to play LeBron. And it's not that he can't go out there and put up monster numbers. You know, this is against Minnesota. He should put up monster numbers, that's for sure. But the big thing here is there's so much good mid-range talent, Dan, on this slate. You could punt. I think we're going to have plenty of value, especially like if Fournier's out, if Hardaway's out, if Leonard's out, if Prince is out, then there's no doubt like you can play LeBron. Yeah, you can play AD if you want to, but I don't think you necessarily have to. So just getting that out of the way. So we already talked about Hazonia. Look, I definitely think it's a risk. He's still below 4K though. It's against Atlanta. You know, if Prince is out, it's going to be a particularly good matchup, by the way. So I think it's fine, but I definitely would put his minutes somewhere around 24, which is right around where I had him before. I don't feel comfortable putting up above 30. I just absolutely don't. And also keep in mind is Kevin Knox. What's the situation with Kevin Knox there? You know, he played, 5 minutes in his return?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So if he's going to play like, if it's like, okay, he can play however many now, then that's a big deal because he played 24 and 28 in his first 2 games. That's going to directly hurt Mario Hezonja, might even hurt Dotson a little bit because there's so many different bodies that you can use on this damn Knicks team. It makes it tough. But just at the top, Dan, you know, I think LeBron eventually will have that game. I think he should be sub 11K though. I do. I think LeBron right now should be sub 11K. There's too many mouths to feed in it. It's seeming more and more like this guy went out to LA so, you know, he could deal with his businesses, find a nice place to retire and have a lot of nice weather. That's what it seems like. Also, I don't know if I want to pay for LeBron when I have Paul George. I mean, Paul George, we know that with Westbrook off the floor, we know that Paul George is going to see ample opportunity to produce, right? Like there's just no question that this is the case. Yeah, sure. Dennis Schroeder, you know, makes a difference, but it's not a Westbrook difference, and it's not even a Carmelo Anthony difference, right? So if you run the numbers since the start of last year, I'll let him load here because this has been taking long lately. With Melo and Westbrook off the court, just a second, I'll come back and give you the usage and the fantasy point or the per minute production. But obviously, Paul George, whose price has actually come down a few $100s, Dan, makes a ton of sense against a really bad Cleveland team. So Paul George definitely in play for me. Do you want to go back to Jabari Parker? You know my qualms with Jabari Parker. I just don't think playing alongside Levine as much as he is doing him any favors. And this guy plays 42 minutes in that double overtime game and finishes with 28 fantasy points. Like it's been bad lately, man. So if you want to and you still think he's too cheap, then be my guest. But I don't think you need to say, okay, I need to play him just because I'm waiting for that big game. It might happen, but I don't think it's imminent. I don't think it's happening, soon. And if it does, I'm okay missing out on that because Jabari Parker has too much risk of giving you like a 15 or a 20 despite playing 35 plus minutes. It's absurd.
Pretty crazy. This slate seems like it's going to be a fun one. I hope for your sake, when you're writing it up, there isn't any crazy like 2:30 news dump by any team that they're resting a bunch of people. But hopefully that all waits till about 5 o'clock before we start getting crazy lineup news throughout.
Let me give you the usage real quick there.
Yep.
On Paul George, 37.5% with Melo and Westbrook off the court since last year. I'm not going to run it with Schroeder on with him. This is enough. Assist rate is 27%. Fantasy points per minute is 1.25. 1.25 isn't overwhelmingly spectacular. However, Paul George is probably, if this game's even remotely competitive, and it's Cleveland, can't say will be, but not having Westbrook does make a big difference. If he plays 37 minutes with that usage, we'll take our 1.25 all day long, and I think he'll produce more than that against a really bad basketball team.
All right. Anything? Where else do we go at small forward, or do you find that the position may need some more digging?
I mean, it's going to need more digging. That's what the article's for. That's what the deep dive's for. That's what the process show is for. You can find all that, right here on YouTube and on awesemo.com, AWESEMO.com, where all the articles, projections, ownership projections, and all that are. But I think you have to give DeAndre Bembry another look. He did still almost play 30 minutes yesterday. If Prince is out, you're going to get around 29, 30 minutes from him again. And there's a good chance that Herter doesn't play well and Bembry plays like 33, 34 minutes. That's very much a capability. If Fournier's out, that's an interesting scenario too, because it's not a tough matchup against Detroit. You could see, here's what I would expect. I'd expect to see Jonathan Simmons get a boost in minutes and Terrence Ross get a boost in minutes. Ross has just, been the more productive player this year. And I think it's a decent matchup for him to pay off. So the only difference is Terrence Ross is 4,700 on DraftKings and Simmons is 37. Big difference. If Simmons starts, you don't have a problem considering him there. And already it seems like we should, based on even if one or two of these 5 questionable guys is out there, it's looking like we're probably going to have a decent amount of value here. Oh, and I already mentioned Kent Bazemore.
That you did. Yep. All right, let's move to power forward, which we've discussed a couple of times as being a little shallower than we've seen in the past here on the podcast we've recorded together. You have Anthony Davis at 11.5, LeBron at 11K, Griffin, Paul George, Mirotic. Then you get Aldridge, Aaron Gordon, Randle, and you already mentioned Rudy Gay's out. Sabonis is down there at 6,100. So a pretty quick drop off from the top of the tier to 10th or 11th priced. You do have some upside talent here. Is this a world where Paul George or LeBron becomes playable at power forward, or do you see some value that could make its way in here at the position?
Yeah, the Davis thing is big, right? I'm honestly shocked by the fact that Anthony Davis has a usage rate. Do you know what his usage rate is this year?
Anthony Davis's usage rate is 29%.
25.
Oh, wow.
25%. Again, I don't think that stays the same, but I don't know, man. I mean, because Mirotic is at 25 as well. Then you have Drew Holiday, who's at 23%. And then you have Julius Randle, right? Here's another one. Julius Randle's come onto this team and he's, producing. He's at 28%. Granted, so a lot of he's coming off the bench. He's staggering those minutes, obviously a lot of them without AD. But when Adam and I were discussing, is it worth right now forcing in a lot of these high-priced guys? The question is really, who is it? I think pace has made a big difference where balance is working a lot because it kind of narrows the gap between amazing performances and really good performances at 11K and then 7K. But look at all of these high-priced guys, or a lot of Anthony Davis. He's now playing with Mirotic on the team for a full season. Julius Randle is now on the team. Elfrid Payton should be back. You have Drew Holiday. Like, those are a lot of guys that, to some extent, at least demand touches and shots. Russell Westbrook, not as much, right? So that's not as big a concern. He's out. But look at LeBron James. That's another team where there are a lot of shots to go around. Even with James Harden and Chris Paul, you add Melo to that team. It might not seem like much, but he's still going to get shots up. All of these guys, outside of like Giannis, even though you'd think, well, what about Middleton and Bledsoe? It doesn't really matter because Giannis does everything. you want to say the same about Davis, but it hasn't been the case this year. Giannis is kind of an exception to the rule, and I think Embiid is too. I'm not saying you want to pay this much for him. I don't think I will be. But Embiid is one of those guys that's just going to get his each and every night. I'm not so sure there's that many of them anymore. And by not that many, I mean maybe like 2 or 3 that, reliably each night you can really count on.
It's do you think that's more because of the concentration of talent on specific teams, the super teams that have developed, so we're seeing less specific usage and thus the worse off teams just don't have as much talent? Like where do you think that breaks down?
I don't know. I think it's more so that you don't have as many teams now that just have like their superstar all-star that gets them to the finals like LeBron did in the Eastern Conference for so long. Even playing alongside Kevin Love or even when he was with Kyrie, now you're getting teams that are trying to do everything they can. And especially in the West, like with Anthony Davis, you have this team that has to add as many pieces as possible. And look, again, I think Davis will see his usage rise above 25%. It's finished at 30 or higher over the last 2 years. But would it be, and this isn't rhetorical, would it be that much of a surprise to see him finish with his lowest usage rate in a few years, being that you brought on a guy like Randle, being that Mirotic is with them now starting the season, you have Drew Holiday and Peyton coming back. I don't think it would be that big of a surprise.
All right. Anybody else at power forward worthwhile, or ready to close it out with some center talk?
I think I only mentioned one power forward, and that was Anthony Davis.
That's mainly what I was getting at. But
yeah, well, Paul George.
Right.
Because Davis is a big piece of this.
That is the question from before, and I know you haven't done any roster construction. How often are you finding using small forwards at power forward or centers at power forward is really the play? Like, do you find sort of any real powered forward only players that you're playing at the position?
Yeah, I honestly haven't really looked at it or considered it that much because I think there's only like 3 or 4 guys that actually have like exclusive power forward position. Like you have Pascal, Siakam, Jaren Jackson, Marvin Bagley, Taj Gibson, Amari Spellman, Maxi Kleber, Ivan Rabb, Georges Niang, and TJ Leaf. Those are the only ones.
That's crazy.
That's it. So yeah, that's pretty wild. But Paul George, yeah, you could plug him in at power forward, no problem. Blake's getting up there in price for sure, but I do really like this spot for him. I think it's a good spot for Blake. He continues to smash. But on the other side of that, I still think Aaron Gordon is too cheap, right? He's still getting huge minutes when, if it's not a blowout. And we've seen a lot of blowouts this year, not just for the Magic, but for like, it feels like a lot of games are just getting washed out. But Gordon is still at a price point where I'm more than happy to continue playing him. You don't need to on such a big slate, but I think he still makes for very solid value. And then aside from that, let's see what happens with Kawhi. That could open some things up in Toronto. Nothing special, but you could definitely see a few openings. And then if Covington's out, I'm gonna put in the deep dive what I expect to happen because it's a whole lot to talk about and we're running really long. But that Covington situation, Dan, could get really interesting against Indy because he's obviously a big part of this team. He's playing 34 minutes per game this season. Wilson Chandler just returned to the rotation, played 10 minutes. So even if Covington's out, Chandler probably doesn't play more than like 15. So who do we see replace him? Who do we see playing big minutes? You could just see Simmons and Fultz more on the court with Redick as well. But do you really want Simmons playing off the ball? And he doesn't really help much in that case. And spacing could be really weird because Fultz isn't jacking up threes. So it's a very strange situation. And they don't have a lot of guys that can play the three is the thing.
All right. Trying to see if anybody jumps off middle or lower price tier. Haven't done a much. I've been paying up a lot at power forward to start the year on the season. So haven't gone this down this deep. You got Sam Decker, who was supposed to be a darling the other night, ended up spraining an ankle. He's out 2 to 4 weeks for Cleveland. So who do they even have? So it's Tristan Thompson. Who else is a power forward on that team as of right now? With Kevin Love. Oh, Nance. Okay, so Larry Nance and Thompson are your front court for the most part. All right. Any cheap power forwards or I'm trying to look through here. No one that jumps off the page is somebody I want to question you on here. So probably worth letting you run whatever else you have here and talking centers and being done.
All right, let's do it. And again, I can't stress enough how much the articles come into play on days like this. I know a lot of people like live and die by projections, but there's nuances that goes into this, especially when you're dealing with injuries and such. All right, let's do it. Well, let me start with Karl Anthony Towns. Can he be aggressive? Can he get the job done? It's a good question. I think in this matchup he can. I do like Towns here. There's more that I'm seeing recently. There's more recently that I'm seeing from Towns that I like than I don't like. Earlier in the season, that absolutely wasn't the case. His biggest game of the season came against the Lakers this season, for whatever that's worth. I think he's still too cheap at 8,800. So until his price tag comes up, I'm going to keep rostering him. Also, JaVale McGee played 17 minutes in that last game. It was over from the start. But my guess is if this game's competitive, he plays another 30 plus. He played 31 minutes against Towns in Minnesota earlier this year. This is not a tough matchup. JaVale McGee is another guy that I'm still willing to roster. And Towns, like I said, I'm back on board. Andre Drummond, interesting spot between him and Vooch. We saw that 63 fantasy point game in overtime from Drummond last time out, 25-24. Dan, he now has 4 20-20 games on the year.
Yep.
So that's insane. Keeping it going here, Rudy Gobert and DeAndre Jordan. I'll probably just not play either side of that. I'm not excited about either of those sides. I think if Whiteside plays, he makes for a really enticing tournament play. Not a guy whatsoever that you could trust in cash, but he does become very interesting in tournaments. You have this home game against San Antonio, a team that is going to be using like Davis Bertans and Jakob Poeltl at the 5, unless Aldridge is getting the minutes there. I think this could be a really good spot for Whiteside that goes heavily overlooked. And as I've stated, I'm not afraid of San Antonio's defense whatsoever. You can throw Steven Adams into the mix, even though I much prefer him with Westbrook on the floor because it's easier for him to rack up easy buckets. But his price has also come down a little bit. Now you're getting Adams at 64 on DraftKings, where he was just 73, 71, and then 68. Tristan Thompson's been playing better, but it's not like you're overly concerned about that either. And then I guess we have to talk about Wendell Carter Jr., right? Because this guy is still really cheap. He continues to put up big numbers. He fouled out in 22 minutes against the Knicks and still had 35 fantasy points.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's been fantastic lately. And we know that his minute totals are going to be through the roof if he stays out of foul trouble, because in this game, he comes in, he has no fouls in the first quarter, and then he has 2 in the second quarter. Then he comes back out for a 5-minute stint and doesn't have any. But I think he came back out, had 1 in the fourth and then another one. So I'm missing something. He had to have had 1, 2. He had to have more somewhere else that I'm just missing, Dan. But he's going. This dude is going to. Oh yeah, he had 2 more to start the third. Okay, and then he played 41 seconds, got his 5th, comes back in a little while later, plays a minute, and then fouls out. I don't expect that to happen. He's done a decent job of staying out of foul trouble, and they're going to really need his defense against New Orleans. This is a spot that I'm more and more finding that I like for Wendell Carter Jr. Yeah, he's going up against AD and Mirotic and Randle, but they're going to need everything they can get out of him, which absolutely makes him more appealing.
Yeah, devoid of projecting foul trouble would seem like a great spot.
Yeah. And whenever you predict foul trouble, you're usually wrong. Me, you, anyone. It's really tough to get right.
Absolutely. And and also knowing what coaches are going to do the benching. Will they go to the bench right away, or will they actually ride them out a little bit? And how often NBA coaches get that so terribly wrong is pretty impressive. You made mention of not really fearing the Spurs defense. Pretty sure they're middle of the pack, and seeing it, they're 17th in defensive rating on the year. This isn't Kawhi, Duncan, it's just a different team. And as much as Popovich can make things work, even early on in the season here, we need to start to see the results for what they are, and start to see that this Spurs team is not going to be that great on the defensive end of the ball. So
they'll
not
be
that,
middle of the road
right.
defense. I think it's fair to say. Like you just
Well,
said, what?
Pau
17?
Gasol's like 73 years old,
He's
and
ancient. Yeah. They'll be middle of the road because Popovich is their coach. That's why.
right.
It's not like there's anyone there that is just a lockdown defender. I mean, Murray was a pretty solid defender. He even lost him. So he lost him, Kawhi, and Green all in the matter of a season.
Yep. Any other names to point out here? Do you let's see. What did Mitchell Robinson end up playing? I know Cantor had the big day. Only 11 minutes in that double overtime.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. I'm a big Enes Kanter fan. I know we were talking in chat somewhere, maybe in the YouTube chat, about who the best Knicks player was. And I even said, I'm pretty sure it's Porzingis now, like even with the knee surgery and having to come back from it.
Right.
He's the best player in the Knicks. But many said Kanter. Would you agree with that assessment that Kanter is far and away the Knicks' best player?
If Porzingis is healthy, he's just like, he's more, the thing about Porzingis is that he's more of an overall asset than Kanter. Kanter is a really good scorer and a really good rebounder, but he's a really bad defender. So that definitely cuts into his worth. But in terms of fantasy production, if Kanter averaged 35 minutes per game throughout a season, I can pretty much assure you that he'd be in the top 5 in fantasy scoring at his position. And I feel pretty confident about that. I mean, just on the year, his per 36s, if you look at, fantasy point per minute production, it should come as no surprise to anybody that, what is he at? Let's see. He is averaging 1.25 fantasy points per minute, which, across the course of a season is really, really solid.
All right. Any other names or takes here before once again saying that you have Dave's Deep Dive Monday, Wednesday, Friday available typically between 2 and 3 o'clock. Obviously, any late breaking news can delay that ever so slightly, but use the promo code EARLYBIRD today. Use it right now over at Osmo.com, and you'll be able to read Dave's article later today. Any other names or notes here before we say so long?
The only other thing I can point out is that I don't know if Jerry and Grant would gain from Fournier being out. My guess is that it would be more Simmons, but I don't know if anyone just, walks into a heap of minutes. So that might be a scary situation to try and navigate. And outside of that, the last player I wanted to mention that I forgot about, I thought about, it reminded me when we started talking about foul trouble, is Jaren Jackson Jr. If he can stay out of foul trouble, I think this is a really good spot for him. The pace of this game will suit him well, and Memphis is going to need him in this game if they have any chance of competing. But we're talking about a guy that is averaging 6.3 personal fouls per 36 this year. Like, he's fouling out per 36. It's been a big issue, and it scares me, but he's sub 5K, and he can give you a really solid effort here if he just stays out of foul trouble. But that is a big if.
Yeah, I said before that projecting foul trouble is difficult, but that's when you're trying to do matchup when someone's actually fouling out per 36 on regular by average.
Yeah, not good.
It's a little easier to project that there. All right, so as always, you guys know where to find them, but I'm going to remind you at Lofty_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D. You can find me at Dan Strafford, and of course, it's at Osmo_com on Twitter. You can head on over to Osmo.com for any questions or concerns. If you're a member, find us in Slack chat. And as always, you find the NBA Strategy Show around 9:15 every morning, and then the Deep Dive at 5 p.m. On the bigger slates. We have a 10-gamer here, so you'll see Adam and Dave at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. With all that said, wish you the best of luck on Wednesday night. You get Adam and EMAC Thursday morning on the Early Bird, and Dave and I are back on Friday morning. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you again here on the DFS Early Bird.